just going to introduce our lovely speaker for this masterclass, Wanuri Kahiu. And Wanuri is a filmmaker, speaker, and science fiction writer. A short award-winning science fiction film, Pumzi, about a futuristic Africa, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2010 and received international acclaim. In 2018, Kahiu's award-winning film, Rafiki, was the first Kenyan film to be invited to Cannes Film Festival and has since won multiple awards across the world. Kahiu is a cultural leader for the World Economic Forum, an advocate for freedom of expression, and an Afro bubblegum activist, championing the need for the creation and the curation of fun, fierce, and frivolous African art. Kahiu is currently working to adapt Octavia Butler's Wild Seed for Amazon Studios and Once on This Island for Disney. Kahiu was named Time Magazine's 100 Next in 2019. So Wanuri, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like we need like a huge round of applause. I wish that Zoom could just do this. So we're going to do the sign language.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
I think thank you very much for joining us as well. So I think what I want to start the conversation with is just to ask you, since we're really framing this concept about directing and the challenges of directing, and you've done so much of it in the past, and currently you're in the middle of directing a film as well. We just wanted to start with, if you could just take us through that journey a little bit of how you actually got into directing specifically.
Oh, okay. So it's a long journey. So when I was 16, I walked into a TV station in Nairobi, right? It wasn't functional because the dictator, President Moi, was the only person who could agree for any stations to go, but it was a fully equipped TV station. But because there was no privatized TV stations at the time, it was just an abandoned one, right? But it was the first time that I walked into anything and realized that people make TV and film. Like, it had never occurred to me that people create it. And the moment that I realized that, I was just like, oh, that's what I want to do. I was super clear. That's what I wanted to do. And so ever since, I would pursue it. And that was when I was 16. So any internships that would come up, I would do. And then I'd do other jobs to support my internships. And then after I did my undergraduate degree, I applied for film school and I got a scholarship. And then I knew that I wanted to make films. I knew that I wanted to make films about where I come from. And I knew that it would be easier for me to direct in Kenya than anywhere else. So as soon as I finished my degree in UCLA, I went home and I started working, making music videos, making NGO documentaries, making anything, and then making some short films. And that's how I started working as a director.
I just want to ask a follow-up question to that, which is, you said once you had finished your degree at UCLA, you realized that it'd be easier to direct in Kenya than anywhere else. I'm like, did people ever say to you, I mean, that's crazy, you should just stay in LA, this is where movies get made, could you say a little bit more about that decision?
Yeah, I mean, people said that if you work your way up in an industry, that's like, if you have no connections and you don't know anyone, you start as an intern somewhere and then you work your way up, right? But I think that what people fail to recognize, especially for an international student who was in America, the only reason I was working was because I managed to get a teacher's assistant job in the university. So then that was what was paying my bills. But in order to get a work visa, I would have had to be interning for free for a couple of years in order to get the job, I was just like, I didn't want to play with my visa issues. I knew that I wanted to be able to come and visit this country and not be out of status and stuff. And I just wanted to go home. I think from living in America, I was very much reminded that the stories that I was telling and the people I was writing about were people who live in a certain place, who have a very complicated family structures that don't know boundaries. I was writing about, in fact, my very first short film was literally a story of one of my closest friends at the time told me. And it was about her and her brother messing around. And she was this dreadlocked Muslim rapper in Kenya. She still is, Nazizi. And I was just like so fascinated, because when you have friends, you're just your friends. You're just like, you know what I mean? But then when you step aside and you write a story, you're just like, you are the most interesting. She would never cover her hair. She had dreadlocks out all the time, but she would fast. Like she had all these, like, it was just like, she was the most interesting person, She sang about smoking weed when you're just like, oh, can you do that? You know what I mean? It was just like, she's the most fascinating. So I wrote a story about her and her brother and like one adventure they got into. And I literally, she told me that story. I wrote it as a script, and that was my first short film. My very first like paid short film, let me say that. Professional was that, and it was for Mnet, which is an African cable station, and that was in 2006, 2007. And then my first feature film was in 2010. 2010, yeah. And so, it was about a bomb. Yeah, it was about a bomb blast. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, I'm saying that my first film was about a bomb blast that happened in Kenya, and I don't think I would have ever had the opportunity if I had stayed, maybe to shoot a short film, right? But not necessarily to be able to shoot a feature. And even to shoot that short film, it wouldn't have been a paid short film. It would have been something that I do with my friends, and I do with, you know what I mean? And we make a concerted effort to make a short film. But a paid short film, I wouldn't have done that if I had stayed in the States. But I knew that there was a possibility for me to do it if I went back home, and I did.
So that also speaks a bit to, owning your voice, right? And kind of the kind of work that you wanted to do, the kind of stories you wanted to tell. And could you say a little bit about kind of how do you, as a director, because you're also a writer, director, how do you decide on the things that you are going to write about, the themes and the stories that come to you?
Oh, I don't think I decide. I know it sounds super new age, but I don't think I decide. Right? I think the only story I'll give you an example. For Rafiki, which is the last feature film I made, it's based my producer, Stephen Markovitz, said he wanted to adapt modern African literature to film. That's all he said. That's all he wanted to do. So I knew I wanted to make a love story. So I just started reading love stories, African love stories. That's all I started to do, was read African love stories. And then I came across Jambula Tree, and I was just like, this is the one I want to make. But that has been my most deliberate of anything. When it comes to thinking through things, That has been my most deliberate process. Otherwise, I'll be going through my life. I read Wild Seed and I was just like, oh my gosh, if ever in my life I could create this into a show or something, I would do that. That would be my most favorite thing to do. When I watched Once on This Island when I was maybe 14 the first time, 14, 15. I was definitely a teenager. And I just thought it was the most romantic musical I had ever seen in my life. And it was so beautiful. And if I ever had a chance in my wildest dreams to recreate it, I would, right? So that's how I went about the world. And so after Rafiki, when I finally got a manager and an agent, the first question they ask you is, what kind of films would you like to make? What kind of work would you like to do? And I said, oh, I would definitely do Wild Seed. I would definitely do a musical like Once on This Island. You know what I mean? As examples of the things that I would like to do. This is the kind of filmmaker I am. I am the kind of filmmaker who wants to do fantasy, science fiction, like Wild Seed, like such and such, right? But then I became very vocal about the things that I wanted. So in any meeting, I would meet anybody. I would, like, any meeting you put me in, truly, I'd say, oh, I want to do Wild Seed. Oh, I want to, and I would make any first conversation I entered with a producer about what I want to do. oh, that's good. Oh, you made that film. That's good. Great. Yeah, fantastic. What I want to do is, right? And I would do that in every meeting until in a different meeting where I was in a meeting talking about a different project. And they said, oh, what would you like to do? I said, oh, I'd love to make Wild Seed, just as a flippant. And they said, oh, we would like to make Wild Seed. And that was Viola Davis's company. And they said, okay, let's get on a separate call and talk about it. So when I got on a separate call and I was talking about it, and they said, okay, so how would you do Wild Seed? Oh, I said, oh, without a shadow of a doubt, I would work with Nnedi on it, Nnedi Okorafor, who's a novelist, an amazing novelist, and also now works in film and TV. And they said, oh, fantastic. You and Nnedi would like to work on it? I said, of course we'd like to work on it. And then I hung up and I said, Nnedi, I just pitched us. I just pitched us to do this, you know? And that's how jobs started coming about. And I started working in the work that I want to do, is because I just became very vocal about the things that I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that because you seem to, you've done so many things, but you also seem to do, like every time you do something, it's very different to the last thing. But it's also, it's stuff that you really want to do, which I think is also difficult. It's like, how do you, for directors who are starting out, how would you advise that they navigate kind of an industry where a lot of the times you have to do stuff you don't really want to do, right?
I mean, I think you balance those things. You definitely, I will definitely do things that I hadn't expected to do. There's work on my slate that I would never have expected to do, but there's a reason I'm doing it, for the story, right? I'm invested in the story, for sure. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't invested in the story. And the one thing that I did for a fact, because although it's hard to make a living as a filmmaker in Kenya. It's hard. So what I was doing is I started being a commercial. I started shooting commercials just to pay bills and things. And you can get into that, but for the longest time, what I would do before children, BC, I would work on a commercial, and I was living quite small, right? I had a 1-bedroom apartment. Like my overheads were very, very tiny. I could fit a desk, no TV. I couldn't afford a TV, but I could fit a desk and a bed and a mattress. I didn't even have a bed on the floor, and I could maintain that, and I could maintain my food, right? And that's all I cared about, to be able to meet my rent, electricity, and food. And every month you're never quite sure if you're going to make it, but you somehow, by the grace of God, you do, right? And that's all I needed to maintain. So I would make enough money from a commercial that I could live on for a couple of months, and then I would spend those months writing. So there's one of two things for people coming in. It's easier if you're creating your own work. So that's one of the things that I don't consider myself a good writer at all, not by a long stretch. But in order to create the work I want to create, I have to write it. In order for me to say, I want to do Octavia Butler's Wild Seed, I have to say, I'm willing to write it. And then the first thing I do when I get a job is I hire a script consultant, because I know I'm not a good writer. So I'll say, hey, I'm doing this project. I'd love to speak to you about it. And then I work hand in hand with a script consultant to help me craft the story at every stage. I know that when they're seeing it, it looks professional, the formatting is good, the story is decent. It might not be perfect, but it's a decent first draft that has been vetted by a professional in their field, right? So that's where my first paycheck goes, because because the film industry is the one place where you are paid to learn on the job. You are literally paid to learn on the job, right? They give you jobs because they give you your first job. At the moment, I'm doing my first American job, whatever that means, you know? But they know it's my first, so they know I'm learning on the job as well. You know what I mean? So then why don't you pay people to teach you on the job? If that's the whole point. So that's how I go through it. But I create as well. The thing that kept me sane and paid through COVID was writing. It wasn't anything else. All I would do in the morning is wake up, sit at my desk from 9 a.m. until 6, 7 p.m. writing. That's all I would do in one location. And I managed to write scripts that got me through, that paid for anything that I need, my expenses, put my children through school. I was able to contribute to my family, and pay for things. And then but my love is directing. And if I could only direct, I would.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing, like everything you've done and like your approach. I really love that insight about writing. Although I'm sure you are a great writer, but but I love that insight around, you feel that, it's your strength, it's directing, and if you need a bit of, if you need some help with something, you can hire someone for that. I think as directors starting out, I remember when I just came out of film school, I think because that's how we learn in very small crews, and you kind of do everything, especially, if you, if in our context and so on. And you kind of have this feeling like you have to be able to do everything before you can do it. Like you feel like everything needs to be perfect before you can get started, or that you have to know how to be all the roles, and I think it's such a great insight that you learn while doing it. I've, even through teaching film at Wits and now at UCT in Cape Town, I've seen how students get the most out of you, kind of, especially in terms of film. It's like you just pushing them along, and you're saying go try this out, and they actually often learn the most with that, as opposed to you really molding them and trying to tell them what to do in terms of what's the best thing to do. But speaking a little bit about, you mentioned a little bit about, your first American film. I don't know if could you share a little bit about that with us, and how is that kind of transition been from working locally, even though you've done work even though a lot of your work has traveled globally, like even Pumzi, you know, went to Sundance. And so you've always been working in a, what I would say, like a local way, like locally, being based locally, but thinking globally. But what has it been like actually physically, because you physically in the States and shooting there. So what is that kind of transition been like?
Okay, before you say that, you know, one of the things that I'm still learning, especially on my passion projects, because I still have them. I still have the projects that I've either started shooting or like been shooting for 5 years, documentaries, and then not finished editing. Like I have all those projects as well, right? That I want to complete. I want to do scripts that I want to write. I've started and stopped. You know, I have. But one of the things that I'm teaching myself actively is that completion is more important than perfection. And that's my biggest continuous learning. Biggest continuous learning is that completion is more important than perfection. Because that's what stops me from doing anything. Because I'm just like, it's not going to be good enough. It's not going to be right. It's not going to be. So that's been a thing. And I've realized that even if it's not perfect, there's something in it that people will see and will take a chance on you. You know, I don't think Rafiki was perfect by any stretch. You know what I mean? But it has moved me to the next level of my career. And I know that there'll be something that's not perfect in this one, but it will move me to my next level of career. It's like this pyramid, and I'm just building the core, you know? But moving into this space has been, it's really surprising in the sense that it's not that different. You get to, like today I got to speak to an animal wrangler, and if it was in Kenya, that wouldn't have happened. I'm sure there would have been I'm sure there's an animal wrangler, but not at the level. I mean, I had a conversation where I said, yeah, we're looking for some animals. And he said, what kind of animals are you looking for? And I said, cute, cuddly, and chaotic. He's like, Dan, I'm going to send you a list. That wouldn't have been, I would not be having the same conversation in Nairobi. You know, I want to help the industry get there so that everybody has a place. But there's this one man's job in Austin, not in America, but in Austin, whose job is just to wrangle animals for film and TV. That's a complete job in Austin, not in Dallas, not in Texas, in Austin. Those are the things that thrill me beyond anything. But otherwise, everything is still the same. I know, and also it's because I'm clear about my work process. So I know that I do things in a particular way. I know I need things done in a particular way in order for me to fulfill my role as a director. So because I know what my role is, and I have clarity on where it begins and where it ends, and I have clarity about what I can ask for and what I can't ask for, I have enough in that structure to play in. And that doesn't change. The director is the director is the director. The producer is the producer. The gaffer is the gaffer. You know what I mean? Everybody has a very clear role in film, regardless of whether you're in a 2-bit put together free movie or whether you're in a bigger budget. Everybody knows their role. And if you've been in the industry, you know everybody's role. You know, I have no business telling the sound person what equipment he can use. He has no business telling me how an actor should speak, walk, or anything. You know, everybody knows their role. So you just stay in your lane. You just stay in your lane.
I mean, that is like so fascinating how, like, if you're on those big film shoots, it can be very different to, like, kind of like, you know, because I come from a documentary background where you have like 3 people, right? 3 or 4 people sometimes
Yeah.
one, like sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so being on those huge film sets can be very disorientating at times. Like it's very intimidating. But like you say,
Right.
it gives, with that clarity, it allows you to kind of just focus on your thing as the director.
Yeah.
And so, and in that kind of setup, your approach. So this is a film, the one you're working on now. That's one that you didn't write, right? This is like,
I didn't write it. I'm purely directing this film. Yeah.
so what is your approach like in terms of, because normally you have written the work yourself, and so
Yeah.
what's it like kind of transitioning as a director from something which you know so intimately because you crafted it, you had it in your mind as a writer, and what is the difference between getting a script and then breathing life into that in your own way?
I truly, I think I'm a better director than I am a writer. I'm not a great writer, but I'm a good director though. I think I'm a good director. I'm not a great writer. So if I could only spend time directing, I would. Right. So the ability to not be writing a film and just solely think on the direction of it is wonderful, because it means that I can imagine the world, the costumes, and just think about that. I don't have to think about whether or not I need to change this line. I can say to the writer, please change this line. I don't have to worry about staying up late to edit something, you know what I mean? Because when I'm a writer, or when I'm writing and directing, it means I'm writing and directing at the same time, you know? But when I'm directing, I can focus on I can spend more time thinking about camera movement. I can watch more films about, I break down. So at the moment, I will only watch films in the genre of the work that I'm making. So then I can see how different filmmakers have approached establishing shots. Young people, old people, lunch scenes, bathroom scenes. Like I can watch that. You see what I mean? And I can just spend time enjoying great artists and just like absorbing great artists and taking notes and being a director. So I love it. I think it's wonderful. When I'm just directing, I think it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So we actually have some questions already. So to everyone in the room, feel free to ask questions. You can type it in the chat if you like. We'll also just open up to the room. We have one question from Uzo. Uzo, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, my name is Uzo. My question is this. I was wondering, do you teach the craft? Because at one point I saw your name with some black something. I couldn't remember now, but yeah. So I was wondering, do you teach the craft? Because I'm interested in learning the craft of directing.
No, unfortunately, at the moment, Uzo, I am only working in directing and writing. I don't teach yet. No, nor has anybody really asked me to. I really tried to teach in Kenya. I tried to teach in a university in Kenya, but they wouldn't have me.
But are you open to teaching somebody? Yeah.
Am I open to?
Yeah, because I want to learn. Mentorship.
I have a mentor at the moment. I take one mentor per film, and at the moment I have a mentor that I am going through the film with.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
And also, Uzo, to answer, if I can also answer your question, we're doing a series of these masterclasses as well with different filmmakers and also film scholars, film teachers. The series of these talks with film lecturers from Howard University in the States. So you can tune into these if you'd like to know, if you'd like to get a little bit more, if you're enjoying this masterclass, there's this one, there'll be others as well. So you can, if you follow Black Women Disrupt the Web on social media, you'll find more masterclasses. And also, I just want to add, one of the best ways to learn the craft of filmmaking is actually just to watch films, and to watch as many films as you can from the greats. So including Wanuri's films. So if you can get a hold of Wanuri's films, I know that we have some of them available in South Africa on streaming sites, on some of the streaming sites. Yeah. Also, Pumzi is available on Vimeo for free. I hope it's not a pirated version that's up there, so I'm not promoting piracy. But Pumzi is online, so definitely, just watch as many great films as you can. Even bad films can be a good teacher sometimes. So because you can see what not to do sometimes. But, yeah. So we've got another question from Carolina. What were some of the challenges you encountered while directing Rafiki? In the Kenyan context, or should I say like directing in Kenya? And what are the challenges?
I mean, every film has its own challenges, obviously. For me, Rafiki was obviously, the subject matter was part of the challenge, and making sure that we were creating a safe environment for everybody who was working in that space, making sure that the main characters felt taken care of, and they weren't, and when I mean taken care of, I mean emotionally, mentally, but also not only once the film was complete, but after the film continued, I mean, past the life of the film, you know? So, but also finding the finances for Rafiki, it took us 7 to 8 years to start before we were able to raise enough money to make Rafiki. I mean, in that time, I thought I was not a filmmaker anymore. I had quit. I was like, I was definitely a commercial director at that point, you know, and only doing commercials. And then I had lost such confidence in the trying to find money and rewriting Rafiki that I had stopped writing. So that was a challenge, like finding the confidence to keep going in your path, or to keep just persistence, to find continuous energy and passion for either one project or even for your own life. Because all the way through this, my mother was saying, why don't you just take a job with a TV agency? You know what I mean? Why don't you just go and work for KTN or something? Why are you struggling? And so there is always a push to get just to be more reasonable and sensible sometimes. And sometimes pursuing your own passion goes past sensibility. So that was one of the hardest things, was just continuously self-motivating, being dogmatic about the things that I wanted to do, incredibly stubborn about my passion, and saying that this is the film that I want to make, regardless of what the government said, what my parents felt about the subject. It was just, yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. So I see there aren't any questions in the queue. If, by the way, anyone, you can ask any questions at any time, feel free to type in the chat your question, or you could just put your hand up or interrupt me when I'm talking. Either one is fine. So just let us know if you have a question. I've got okay. Well, Jethro is, yeah. Let's have Jethro's question, because I've been talking quite a lot. So,
Jethro. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you though. I already pressed the camera and it was too late.
Go ahead.
Hi everyone. Hi Wanuri. I'm sorry I joined a bit late, but I just wanted to ask about writing and working with writers, because there's that sort of Hollywood approach, which is like, more of an established approach where there's a writer and a director, but I feel like there's this emphasis on young independent filmmakers to be writer directors. And I really, I think I agree with you. I suck at writing scripts. And I was wondering, like, what would your advice be to young filmmakers in terms of reaching out to young writers? Do you just approach people that you hear are writing? Like, I just don't think there's a lot of networking opportunities in South Africa for meeting writers that are dedicated just to that. And it almost seems like directors have to do it all. And I like what you said about just concentrating on the film and having a writer to bounce ideas off. So I was wondering if you could expand on that, because I know that you worked with Jenna on Rafiki.
Yes, I worked with Jenna on Rafiki. Jenna was easy to find because Jenna and I knew each other. So it's really unfortunate. I agree, because not only because it would be great to collaborate with more African writers or writers who live on the continent, because there's a shorthand that doesn't need to be explained, especially when you're writing about the continent, right? And I don't know where to find them. But also because as I move into this sort of American space, people are constantly asking me about writers, and I have no idea what to say. And even when I write locally to script place and I say, please send me a couple of your writers, or you know what I mean, I don't know which way, short of going on Twitter and saying, I'm looking for a writer, you know what I mean? I have no actual idea. It's a good question, but I'm not clear on how to find writers on the continent at the moment. And there is a need for them. And I know I am being asked about them. So I wish I could answer that question for you. I don't know about network. I wish that there was more networking opportunities, and they are at film festivals and things and writers' workshops sometimes, but we don't seem to have a database or anywhere. You know, in the Writers Guild here in America, you have a Writers Guild. You can be like, oh, blah 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 blah. You know, it might, and they create networks and they create hangouts, and they're deliberate about their interactions. But on the continent, we don't have it. It's really hard to. But anyway, what I was saying as well is that I'm not sure if you caught it, but the only reason I write is because I want to create the content, and I can't find for this exact reason. I can't find the right writer, so I'll write it myself. It won't be great, but it will be written. You know what I mean? And then learning, and then just keep learning on the job.
And that's a great, because we don't have that, that's a great opportunity to actually create this kind of link, right? So
yeah.
So we do have, I know in South Africa, we do have a Writers Guild of South Africa. So Jethro, maybe that's something that maybe you could, suggest to them. Let's do like a directors and writers meetup, and it could be like a session like this. Especially now, like even though we don't have the festivals anymore, this could be a great opportunity while we're all at our computers to like get together in this way. So, but thanks for that question, because it's a really great thing that you brought up. It's a really important thing you brought up.
And just thank you also on that point that you brought up, Wanuri, about completion over perfection. I really resonated with that, and I think it's something that you sit with the project for so long and get just
so long.
Stuff is so empowering. So really, I think that was great, a great tip. Thank you. And good to see everyone. I'm gonna slip away now.
Thanks for that, Jethro. So we've got a couple more questions in the chat. One was, how do you work, from T Bundi, which was, how do you work on script development and project development phase in your productions?
It depends on which project, but usually it's all research based. For any script development or any production development, it's all research based. So for a script, it's finding out about the world, investigating the characters. Why would they think, feel, say these things? What are their vulnerabilities? What is their pain? What is their fear? Like really, really investigating and moving into that world. And then the same thing for pre-production or development of a film. You really think about what you want to see, what you want to feel, what you want to hear, but what you want to feel is a good question. And I use it a lot for when I'm going into a film, I ask and I write, this is what I want you to feel as an audience. And then that's the most important thing to communicate to your department heads. I want us to feel this, because that might not be a color, but if you give them a feeling, it could lead to an inspiration for you know what I mean? But I'm very clear about the feeling word. And this scene should feel happy, yet remorseful, yet hopeful. You know what I mean? And then that can be interpreted in music in a different way than it can be interpreted in production design, in a different way than it can be interpreted in makeup and costume. You know what I mean? So all those things, but you just have to be clear about what it is at every point.
That's really great advice. And then from Neha Manoj, I hope I'm saying that right. Apologies if I mispronounced. Do you have any just kind of general tips for first-time directors, do's and don'ts?
Just do. There is no don't. Just do. Just do. The best way to do anything is to make. Like you literally learn on the job. And that's what the best film schools or the best programs are programs that just help give you space to create. So just do. At the moment, we can, and I mean this, and I don't mean this in a facetious way or anything. I am currently the ambassador of a mobile movie festival. And that is films that are shot entirely, edited entirely on your phone, right? There's new ways of creating. Just create. If you're creative, create. That's it. I'm sure you could read a book, and there's many books, and I'm sure you could, but just do. And you'll have a better understanding of the work that you're doing by just doing. And all the mistakes you make, and how embarrassing it will feel, and how mortified you'll be when you see your first cut, and when you show people your work, and how anxious and gut-wrenching and painful the whole process is, how you will question every moment of your of your creation and yourself as a creator. That's all part of it, but you just have to do it.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Like you said earlier, you learn by doing. It's the kind of job where you learn on the job, right?
Yeah.
That's also the spirit of web series, which is really the project that we're doing. Is that that's the great thing about web series as well, that you get a lot of freedom to learn through experimentation and doing things and playing around with like digital technologies and all those things.
Yeah.
So great question, great answer. We had a question from Tina Louise, which is, when you say you can't find the right writer, so you write yourself, what do you mean that the writers aren't the right writers?
I just don't know. It's not that they're not the right ones. I'm sure there's many right ones, but where are they? Where do I find them? Is there a database? Is there where do I find them? It's the question. It wasn't an answer. It was I can't find the right writers. Where are they? It was a question. So if you know, please tell me.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to. Oh, so Tina says, what's wrong with the writers that you have?
Which writers do I have? I write everything myself.
Yeah,
what's wrong with me is that I'm not a great writer. That's the problem. I am the writer and I'm not great. That's what's wrong with the writers I have.
But yeah, I think also what Jethro was saying is that there also needs to be more opportunities for directors and writers to connect, like writer-director meetups and that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
getting out of
Yeah.
their kind of silos in terms of that.
Yeah.
And so then we have another question from Christine Savan. Could you touch on the importance of directors and producers working together from the beginning of the development of the process?
Oh, okay. First, hi, Christine. I'm glad you're here. Christine is a filmmaker and a producer from Kenya. She's somebody to watch out for. So producers, it's really important that the producer and the director are on the same side. They know what kind of film they're making, and not what is written on the page, but what is the spirit of the film that we're making? What is important about the film that we're making? Because that is not only about what you will see at the end of the day on the screen, but also it will dictate who you hire, if your priorities are money over kindness or kindness over, that's a thing. You know what I mean? How the energy of a set runs. What are your priorities for the film? And for me, mine has, in any production, it's kindness and respect. How can we make sure kindness and respect? So you go into that film with that, and you take that, you and your producer agree on that. So that if there's a member of crew or a cast member who doesn't fall in line with your same perspective, your producer has your back and is able to say, that's not our direction because that's not our perspective. You know what I mean? But alignment and communication are essential, even before it comes into the creative, right? And then you get into the creative. You need somebody who's going to support you as a director creatively. But your producer can only support you creatively if they believe in what you believe in, if they believe in you. If they doubt you or there's a lack of trust, then that's when things begin to fray, you know? But in every process, I try as soon and as early as possible to give my visual language to the producer so they know what kind of film I'm trying to make. So I'll make lookbooks, I'll make Bibles, story Bibles, just to say, I see the costume in the following ways. I see the hair in the following ways. I see the locations in the following ways. Or sometimes I just start on Pinterest and I invite people to my Pinterest board. And in my Pinterest board, I'll have each character, I'll have the locations per location broken down, and then I'll put ideas, you know, a house like this, its interiors would look like this. This is the kind of lighting or look that I'm looking for. The kitchen should look like this, you know, and it can just be a Pinterest board. But as soon as they can see my ideas, then they can see the direction that I'm trying to head. And then it helps creatively if you're on the same page.
Okay, great. I think Lungelo had a hand up. Lungelo, do you have a question?
Hello. Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Wanuri I don't know how to say your last name, and I'm afraid
Kahiu.
Kahiu. Thank you very much for this, and it's very. I'm also a filmmaker. I also teach film. I'm a writer-director, and I appreciate your advice because I'm in South Africa. I'm in Pretoria, but yeah, Pretoria, Johannesburg, and the struggle of finding writers was always tough for me as well. I studied in the US for quite a while as well. Then I came back home for similar reasons. I just knew that the stories I was telling were South African, and I needed to come home and sort of be rooted here to find myself as a filmmaker. So I really appreciate your words, and they're very inspiring. And I also was struggling to find writers, and I just decided to commit to being a writer-director because, like you say, you create your own stuff. You have to find your voice on paper, and then hopefully in the future you can focus more on directing. I guess my question really is, thank you. So thank you very much for everything. My question really is, how, as a filmmaker, like you said, you have to find ways to sustain yourself. So you write your own stuff. You were directing commercials. You know, how do you find a way to balance all of that? Because, and I'm asking because I'm just trying to figure out for myself, you know, if you direct a documentary versus directing a music video versus directing a film, documentary in particular, how do you find that informs your filmmaking? Because you seem much more of a narrative filmmaker, but when you direct music videos, you direct everything else, particular documentary field, what are the pros and cons, and does it really improve your filmmaking skills, your narrative, your narrative films, and how you work? Yeah, that's my question.
I think the way that I do it, honestly, is approaching every film as a classic story with a 3-act structure, right? So for whether it's a documentary or a commercial or whatever, I tend to lean towards more narrative type, right? But even when they're not completely 100% narrative, I'll still write an act 1. And where does act 1 end? What is has the character moved to, you know what I mean? Have they started their journey? Have they moved past the point of no return? And then I will write that out. Unless it's the NGO documentaries, which are really hard to do that. But even then, when I structure my interviews with people, I also structure my questions as a beginning, middle, and an end, which is, where did you start? How has this changed you? You know what I mean? So that there's a narrative structure as well, even within that. So my approach just for myself has been to try and do that, because I know that I am a narrative director and that's where I live and breathe the best. But when I'm creating outside of that, even installation art, I start with, where does it begin? Where does it end? What is the emotional journey I want to take an audience through? Like, that's the most even in a talk. What is the emotional journey I want to take the audience through? Where does it begin and where does it end? And then I craft, and I've started doing this more and more consciously. I craft for emotion. I craft to create a desired emotional effect. So that's how I've started approaching things. So that I want the audience to feel like this at the beginning. I want them to feel like this at the end. And then I work towards that. And that can be in color again, music. But once I know where my landing point is, then I create for that journey, for that emotional journey.
I see. Thank you very much. It's very informative and powerful. And I can see how you're saying you use your narrative skills and understanding to then shape other things, and we all tell stories to move an audience. So that's very, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lungelo. And we also just got a question from Sam Bugatsia, who is the leader of Rafiki. I'm loving this question, by the way. Sam asks, assuming a film exists in a different dimension, are you able to exist in 2 films at once? What are the pros and cons of this? Also really excited to be here.
Hi, Sam.
Yes, Sam. Excited to have you.
Hi, yay. I understand your question. Yes, because even in the film I'm shooting, it's kind of about a multiverse. And I believe in multiverses. I believe that at every decision, at every so often, we have to ask a question that takes us on a journey. Am I going to make coffee? If I make coffee, I've set myself off on a different journey than I have if I haven't had coffee. Just because it's taken time to do this, when this other narrative of myself was doing something else, right? So I already truly believe that there's many multiverses that we exist in as it is. which is another whole nerd conversation that we can nerd out on, right? Another time. But if you're making two creations, you are allowing your existences to go into different stories, into different worlds. I truly believe that. So right now I'm working on Wild Seed. I'm working on Once on This Island. I'm working on this film. And I feel like when I'm working on them, I'm solely in that thing. I'm solely invested into this world, right? And then I leave, I extricate myself from this world, and I immerse myself in another world. And in this world, this is all I'm thinking of, right? But it is completely possible. But because I think we're varied individuals with many sensations. Okay, you know what I mean? We are the things that make us laugh, cry, things, all those things are so varied that we can channel different things into different creations and exist and then be as different as possible, but also continue to exist in multiple platforms. Yes. And on that note, you should be making more films for sure. If that's, yeah.
Yeah, we're getting metaphysical now. This is really, I feel like I'm really being stretched mentally. But Sam, I actually have a question for you, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot. What was it like working with Rafiki in terms of that director-actor relationship? What was the process of working with Wanuri like on Rafiki?
Yeah, so it's very interesting, like how we met. We met through a mutual friend at a pop-up. So yeah, it's kind of those pop-ups that, it's like 15 to 20 people, and I'd call it a safe space, a safe and very, very like safe niche, interesting, deliberate space. So we were hanging out, and yeah, it was the first time like I read a script. I thought it'd be like really boring, because I was like, yeah, this is a lot. These are many pages, and yeah, from the moment I started reading it, I couldn't stop. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's a space you are in. And yeah, I think from then it was just, yeah, it just became history, because yeah, we're friends, we're really good friends, and we're able to just nurture that through the process.
Okay, great. And so after being friends, it's great that that you guys are still friends, after the process of making a feature together, which I guess can be quite stressful, right? Like being in this pressure cooker environment. So how did you manage that?
Like it was real, like it's a pressure cooker. So like, of course I'll get pissed off and say I'm sorry, and you work through it. So that's what I'm saying. It was a space that like we were able to nurture.
Okay, great. I hope you guys are gonna work together again, because I felt there was a real there was a real synergy there. Like it's like a special director-actor relationship. What I've got a question about that, because as a documentary filmmaker, I'm always curious the relationship between directors and actors. And by the way, everyone else on the call, feel free to jump in again with your questions. But I have a question around what is the best way, really, and this is a question for both of you, in terms of working with actors, because directors sometimes will say to an actor, I need you to be more sad. Could you just be more? And actors sometimes struggle to respond to direction like that. Or how do you kind of, there's a certain kind of language, right, between the two. So what is the approach that needs to happen, from Wanuri, from your point of view, and Sam, from your point of view, in a situation like that?
Well, I'm not judging, but more sad is a bad direction, because what does that mean? Sadness has so many variations. Is it grief sadness? Is it, what kind of sadness are we talking about? So I think that for me, the job of the director is to remind the person, because you're inhabiting a real person. So to remind a person of the emotional space that they're in. So in this scene, this has just happened. You're going through a breakup. Your mother has just been rude to you. Your job is to create the environment of the world and the character at that moment. Where did you come from? Before you came into this house, where did you come from? What were you feeling when you walked in through the door? Were you excited or were you already upset? Because that was going to change the way you come, the energy that's going to pull you into this scene, and is going to change your reaction to who you're dealing with and how you absorb what they're saying to you. So it's really putting the person in that space and asking questions. Why did you make that decision? When you said that, what were you feeling? Okay, that didn't come across. Or what are you trying to say? You know what I mean? But being very involved in the location and character specific moment, I find is the best way to try it. And sometimes you won't achieve what you necessarily want, but the result is perfect.
And Sam, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I'd say now achieving, like, one thing we noticed, like, because of the synergy, like most of like my first takes were the best because of being able to achieve the moment. So I feel like the environment that Wanuri created would like challenge you individually to just have your shit together in the sense that like am I present in this moment? Like, was I able to get my breath work right? You know, do you have your sad song playlist? You know, are you able to jump into this? You know, are you able to get happy in the afternoon? You know, but it's like it just challenges you to have like that individual drive to just achieve the best for your character every day and however you feel.
Yeah, no, totally get it. And that's some great advice there. Also, Uzo said results directing is bad directing. So in terms of, and Uzo is saying in terms of saying like, be more like this or do that. But actually it's a process of getting there and working together, right? That's what I'm getting from both of your responses. It's like, you know, you need to really work together on creating this in an authentic way. And that acting is not kind of pretending, but it's actually being in the moment.
Being, exactly. Acting is not acting. It's really reacting to the situation. It's reacting to the person who's in front of you.
Yeah. Okay, well, Sam, thank you so much for allowing us to put you on the spot like that. I know you were tuning in, so thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
I think it's time for us to start winding up. So I'm going to just ask Wanuri one more question, and I think you've already, answered, a lot. But I just wanted to ask you in terms of going forward. What are the kinds we know you're doing? You're going to be doing Octavia Butler's work and that kind of thing, and you've been doing all these different genres. Uzo says your email. Give us your email. I think we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, just in terms of the genres that you've been working in, what are the other things that you I know you're going to be doing Octavia Butler, and what other kinds of directions are you looking to move in the future? And now you're doing this Netflix film.
I think I want to continue. I think I want to be unexpected. I want everybody to be like, hey, that's what Wanuri's like. I never expected Wanuri to do anything like that. I really want to be unexpected. But the one thing that I want to do in every single film is make sure it's full of hope and joy. Hope and joy. Those are the things, those are my mandates. That at the end of the film, you feel hopeful, and that there's some level of joy, even in moments of hardship or whatever, that there's tenderness, grace, kindness, but it must always end with hope and joy. That's my mantra. And so anything that helps me achieve putting more of that into the world, I will endeavor to make it as best as is possible.
I really love that, hope and joy. I think that's a great way to end the session. Thank you so much for this. It's been great. I feel like I've learned so much, and yeah, like I trust that everyone else in the call has as well. It was really lovely to hear and eye-opening to hear about your process and how you work and the ways in which you get to really do the things that you want to do and your vision for doing those things. So thank you for this. Thank you for this inspiration. We've posted Wanuri's social media handles there on IG. You can follow those to see what she's been doing next, what she'll be doing next. And I just want to also thank everyone else on the call that made this possible. Thank you, Patricia, also for facilitating this from Afro Bubblegum. Black Women Disrupt the Web. Please follow us on social media. We're doing a project with 5 Black women who are making web series in 4 different countries, including Wanuri's home country of Kenya. So please do look out for our web series that'll be coming out later this year. There'll be 5 different web series. Yes, I also want to thank our lovely interpreters for being on this call. Taina, who's doing the Portuguese, Jose, and Ron. Thank you so much for your interpretations. And thank you to everyone who came to the session, who participated. It was really, really a great session. I know, and Lars, sorry, thank you to Lars, the interpreter. I know that I will be watching this many times in the future once we have this downloaded and uploaded somewhere. It was really great. So thanks again, Wanuri, and hope to see you soon.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And good luck with the shoot. We can't wait to see it.
Thank you. Okay. Take care.
Bye, everyone.